Hello and welcome to Florida Man 40k, your favorite Florida Man 40k podcast. I am rejoined by my co-host Will. Welcome back, Will.
Hello.
And Mr. John Boy King Lennon.
What's up, everyone? We don't have a Dan today, and so Tim is just kind of like defaulting to the Art of War intro. I love it.
Yep. That's going to be your nickname, and I'm going to make it stick until we can find something better. So
All right,
that's your homework if you want a better one. And we are joined by Reggie the Silver Fox Sanchez. What's up, Reggie?
Hey, how you doing? Welcome all the toaster heads.
Reggie is one of the locals in my area, South Florida, and a longtime member of Brohammer, and also the TO of the Crucible Major. If you have not gone, you should totally go. He is also a huge AdMech aficionado, and he is here to join us to pretty much talk all things AdMech. We're not going to be doing like a codex review or anything like that. We're just going to literally talk about what is out there, the archetypes, how to salve the pain, so to speak, and if you're an AdMech player, what kind of builds are out there and other things you can look for. So Reggie, before we cut, we were doing before we started recording, we were doing a lot of talking, stuff that if you're a Patreon, you're going to get to hear. But let's go ahead and continue that conversation and just dive right in. Give us a summary of the book and the archetypes, and let's just dive into it.
Okay. So when I was hotly anticipating the book coming out, and I think all of you heard me complaining about the GW's logistic nightmares, and why we hadn't gotten the book, and I was hoping to use it in May before I went on vacation, and that didn't happen. So it actually, outside of being a word lasagna on some of the data sheets and just absolutely a tough read, it's everything I really wanted to improve on the units, how they interacted with each other. One of my favorite things was how one of my pet peeves was that you really the high damage strength weapons weren't consistent enough, and then so when I would use them, they would falter, and it was always tough sledding for anything that was T7 and above. I always felt, unless you skewed hard into a build that had a lot of plasma, or if it had or any other delivery mechanisms. And I think the book has delivered on those, albeit it's delivered a little too much on some other things that we can get into.
I like how you phrased that, delivered too much.
Yeah.
Perhaps overtuned.
Yeah, I think it's definitely overtuned. It definitely plays to the fluff. You have the idea is that much like the Imperial Guard, you have throwaway units. They can just make more Skitarii. They either manufacture them or whatever. But it plays to that notion that you have tons of troops. They definitely upped the units that were weak in 8th. All the Sicarians are really a really underutilized unit because they're being overshadowed by Rangers and Vanguard at the moment. And then they made everything else more consistent. So I want Las Ballistari. Oh, check. I wanted more shots from my Ballistari autocannons. Check. I wanted nicer options on my Honor Dragoon crawlers. Check. So it's like if you go through every unit. I think the only I think the only disappointment is anything that did not get the core keyword. And I think that's an overall theme. I've had discussions with Tim on it. But I think if you would have gotten it, if servitors would have gotten the core keyword, then I think there would be a lot more. I don't know how you would. It's hard enough to try and fix this issue with the rest of the meta, or how it interacts with the rest of the meta. Then if you throw in all the cataphrons into that mix, it just becomes a really tough thing to, outside of retracting the entire codex.
So what does that look like as far as it translates onto the table? Because I know whenever I played AdMech before, it was very common that you would see 2 to 3 disintegrators, several transports, the Dune Riders, 0 to 3 planes, typically, and then you'd see your usual Vanguard units, like a unit of 2, maybe 3 of the dogs, and then you'd have your troop techs, and then characters, and it very much felt like a castle that just kind of obliterated you, while pushing up with the dogs and the troops. Maybe a unit or 2 of priests kind of be like the second or third wave. By the time the priests came out, you're out there, because you're having to deal with the dogs to play the mission, and trying to kill firepower where you can. Usually by the time the priests come out, most time the opponent didn't have enough scraps of an army left to put together to really deal with the priests. And if the priests, charged, got that invuln off, that would usually kind of seal the deal if the opponent wasn't up on points. From what I've seen, the army, in the army trays and on the table, doesn't look like that anymore, and I'm assuming doesn't play like that anymore. So like how does the army play now, like on the table? What does it look like?
Yeah, you mentioned before, it was pretty much a moving castle, and with a ton of close combat elements, and you had some units that you could just throw in the middle and they would just stay there. So, for example, priests. You had you always had an archetype of, you had a big mass unit of chickens, the Ballistari, and you also had, the Scorpius tanks, which were pretty much an auto take. Now, I think what you definitely see in your core of your list, no matter what it is, it's going to be 2 to 4 20-man blobs of Rangers or Vanguard. Take your pick, whatever the person chooses, but usually you have one of both, just because of their utility and what you're facing. You're always going to have a Marshal, and you're always going to have a Manipulus, just because the Manipulus directly buffs the Vanguard. I mean, that's definitely their intent, was you want to see more troops on there. And then, I think one of the comments that you said when I was testing this, the new book out, when finally we could, it's like, oh my God, that looks so different than what you've been taking. And it's just a complete 180. I've been taking a lot of vehicle builds throughout 8th, a lot of priest heavy builds, but now it's mainly you're looking for the board control that you're going to get from your troops. You're looking for the firepower from the Ballistari, and then it's really, you're mixing in the units of your choices, and I think a lot of the power in that, it really lies in how you are able to, once you're making your moves, you're maneuvering, that you're within your coherency check for the next turn. Is that like your coherent? So before, it used to be, I need to be in coherency check for my shooting phase, like right now, or my, if you had a close combat army, you wanted to, I need to be in coherency check so that I can get the charge off. I can, re-roll hits in combat. Now it's, I need to set up my next turn. So you're no longer, it's not an immediate need, it's a future need that you have to have. Because usually when you set up, you're already set up, and when you deploy your army, you're already set up for this turn, unless you make a grave mistake. But you're already set up for this turn, and you're going to give everybody your buffs, but then they just move and they go off on their way, and you need them to do whatever you need them to do, which I think plays great, except if you don't set it up for the next turn, if you don't have your ranges on there, you're not going to be able to cast that ability on turn 2, which it can be very key and critical. Particularly if you're trying to overcome some of the defensive buffs of your opponent.
And when you say coherency, you're referring, of course, to the like a theoretical coherency with all of your like support characters or support powers, all that stuff. Like instead of just auras in the shooting phase, it's what's going to happen in my next command phase. I think that's something that all the 9th edition books have experienced. I know that's what the command phase is about. It's new, but it really feels like AdMech has taken the command phase to an entirely different level. Where, if I'm being honest, like as a Space Marine player, I kind of wrote off command phase and just like replaced it with at the beginning of the movement phase, because I literally did one thing. Like it's like, oh yeah, I need to roll my chaplain, and that was the command phase. Cool, let's start moving. And it's literally just before I did begin the battle round. Now it's at the beginning of my movement phase essentially. So it's technically before, but just do it before you move, because it's only 1 or 2 things anyway. AdMech is the first time that it's really felt like a whole phase where this is more complex than most psychic phases that I see. Like outside of Grey Knights, Thousand Suns.
If you're a Necrons player, you're definitely used to it. They've been dealing with My Will Be Done for a while.
Right, but it feels like it's more than just My Will Be Done, because like every character has their own different thing, and then you like.
Yeah, I mean, the order of operations. I mean, so one of the keys to success is definitely the order of operations, and part of that is, at the beginning of my turn, I've got to plan out my Doctrina, whether or not I'm going to take it for the turn, and then I've got to plan out my Canticle, and which one I'm going to, to sing, so to speak. And I think, you plan those out. You're looking at, particularly the Doctrinas are, the deprecation can be kind of crippling. I found that, turning on Bulwark just left me very susceptible to not being able to countercharge my opponent if I didn't plan correctly, or left me kind of like in the open, or just having to have a unit just sit there and just kind of hunker down. I think another key to success in the command phase is tokens. You have to have tokens, and then you have to have more tokens. So, because it's very difficult for you to sit there and remember. So you've got things that you do. So your Canticles and Doctrinas are at the beginning of the round. Anything that is part of the Holy Orders is in the command phase. If you are going to switch the Holy Order, it's an action that has to occur, and you have to remember to not move your character if you're gonna go from initial to advanced. You have to make sure that you're giving all your buffs for data tether. Data tether being very, very important. You have to do that first before you do any buffs from your marshal.
Now go ahead, real quick. Talk to us about data tether, because it's a term that we hear thrown around a lot, and not everyone might know what it means.
Yeah, I have no idea what data tether means.
All right, so data tether basically is an extra length antenna, and there's certain actions or commands that you can give Skitarii units. It's only Skitarii units, not Cult. You can give a command to that is very far away. So most of the time the buffs are within 9 inches or 6 inches. With the data tether, you can just do the entire game board. So
Oh wow.
yeah, and all it requires is there's two things it requires. The first is having for Vanguard. It's an option for them. Vanguard and Rangers, it's an option for them. But you can only take one upgrade. So it's either the Omnispecs, which ignores cover, or you can take the enhanced data tether, which automatically gives them data tether. And so in order for you to take both of them, you have to have 20 guys in your unit. If you don't, you can only take one or the other. Yeah, I know. Right. So you can, so you have that choice, but it's a 5-point upgrade. But for most of the time, you're taking Honor Doom Crawlers, or you're taking a Scorpius tank, or you're taking your Ballistari. And all those guys have enhanced data tether, which means in the command phase, if they're within 6 inches of a unit, you can give it data tether. And
okay.
So if my Marshal is in one corner and I want to give that unit to ignore deprecation command, which means, if I have Bulwark on, it means I get to ignore the -3 inches to my movement. So it just, that order of operations has to be done correctly, and I've seen some instances where people kind of get a little sloppy with it, but I mean, again, we're talking about having a good game with your opponent. I'm pretty sure most people will say, oh yeah, I know what you meant to do that. So, but it is, you can go, you can kind of, if you don't have your tokens, going back to the tokens, if you don't have your tokens there, and I color code mine to make sure that I'm cycling through them and saying, okay, I've got this left, and this is on this, on my Marshal. Okay, I've got to give this command over here, and it takes a little bit of pre-planning, and you just can't throw your units out there and expect that that turn 2 you're going to have that same thing. So and it also combines with the strategy that I've seen a lot of people discuss, and I've seen a lot of people in action talk about, particularly when you're looking at moving units up the field, and certain builds do that better than others, and you want to be able to give them those commands, because sometimes the deprecation can be really crippling, depending on what you're trying to do. And I think does anybody else have any comments on that? I mean,
that was a great wrap up of what data tether does. So it sounds like a range extender / aura repeater, or character buff repeater is what it sounds like almost.
It's only certain abilities, so it's not like you're gonna get your reroll ones and things like that. That still has to be an aura. That's an aura. You still have to be within that range. But you like certain things, you're able to give them the certain command that they're going to need for them to carry out whatever you want them to do.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as they're like little like cell towers all over the board, where the command phase buff is pick a unit within 9 or data tether. So effectively, if your unit wants to get the buff, they need to either be in a range of the character or one of your cell towers. So like, if your Sicarans want this command phase buff, they don't have to be near the Marshal. They need to be near the Marshal or a Dune Crawler or a Ballistari, whichever data tether you kind of took in this instance. So I just think of it as plan out your cell towers, get maximum coverage, and you'll still get to use your buffs, even if your army happens to be moving all over the battlefield.
Spread that 5G.
Spread that 5G.
While we're sitting here learning about AdMech, what are I know everyone's kind of heard about like Lucius and Mars. I know what Mars used to do. I'm not really 100% certain on what it does now. I know for 100% what Lucius does. That's the one we all seem to be hearing about, but it might be a good time to kind of do a refresher. What do you think are like the viable Forge worlds, and like what is their kind of thing at like the high level, like durability, maneuverability, damage, that kind of stuff?
Okay, so Mars is definitely my favorite. and it if you remember the old build in 7th edition, which was the one where they combined it.
Oh god, what was it?
It was the I think it was I want to say something.
War Convocation.
War Convocation. Thank you.
Yeah.
So it basically gave everything the canticle, because there's a strict divide in the army that Skitarii only get communication via these code triggers, and it basically disseminates these orders down, and that's really what the Doctrina is. So that's the divide there. And then you have your cult side, which is more on the religious side, where they do a hymn, and that basically that song goes throughout, and it's just basically another tune that they also get buffs that way. Well, Mars combines them both and gives everybody all those buffs. So you can get bulwark, so you get +1 to your save characteristics, plus you get everybody in cover. So you can combine those two things, the canticle and the Doctrina. So that's their first trait. Their second trait is everybody gets 1 reroll and to hit per unit. So that's either in combat or in shooting. So
kind of like Master Artisans.
Oh, and don't they also get a reroll of damage roll? Is that their?
No, that's a canticle that you. So when you do that, now you're getting 2 rerolls to hit, and then you're getting a reroll to wound, an additional reroll to wound, and you're getting a reroll for damage.
Oof.
Yeah, that's it, huh?
That's it.
That's all.
That is it. Yes. So so Mars, typically the Mars build has always been a castle build and damage dealing output from range. So you have your ability to, their unique strat is, I think they tapered it off. It used to be, you give a unit the Wrath of Mars, and any 6s to wound would and it didn't matter how many 6s it was, would cast Immortal. So now it's capped at 6, and but it's still a great tool, even though it's just 6. I think with the withering firepower from your Ballistari, your Rangers, and everything else, it can be oppressive in that nature. Now, depending on what type of board you're playing on, whether it's the GW style or it's what we've seen, from the FLG style or some of the other tournaments that I've been watching, Mars has play. I think less so in the GW board, since it's very heavy on obscuring, and so Mars struggles with trying to get angles if your opponent can hide. So they would have trouble with marine builds that are slim and can just stay in a building and then just run at you, White Scars, for instance. They did help solve the delivery of certain for other factions outside of Lucius, that there's a warlord trait that you can give, and it's quite funny because it specifies Cult Mechanicus Core, but there's only one Cult Mechanicus Core, period, in the list building aspect of it. I know you can make the Castellan robots, you can make them core, but in list building they're not core, so it's really just your priests. You can take one priest unit and put it in Deep Strike, which is a nice, it's a nice tool to have.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what they do. Lucius, their special tactic is they get +1 save for any damage 1 weaponry that against the unit. They also get an extra 3-inch range to all their guns. and they have a warlord trait that allows them to ignore. One unit can ignore wound any roll of a wound of 1 through 3, which is immense for T3 models. And but it's only core, and then the other their relic is really good, which is basically a core unit can, or any unit I think they can pick up and basically zoom it across the board 9 inches away from your opponent, which really helps with angles and helps with board control. So just depends on, I've seen a lot of different tactics. We can go to the tactics that I've seen and I think are pretty nifty once you do. I think you can probably get your opponent once, or but once people see it and they kind of note it, they'll figure out ways to get around it. So that's Styges 8. They are they have so it's -1 to hit for infantry outside of 12 inches. So pseudo Raven Guard, and for any vehicles it's outside of 18 inches. And they have a nifty warlord trait of redeploy, but it's only within their deployment zone. So you can forward deploy units and then pull 2 back if you want to. They also have a stratagem that allows them, and it was just recently FAQ'd, that allows them to just move 2 units into an infiltrate for 1 CP each. And so I think that one is that Forge World is kind of curious to me, and particularly with heavy, when you have heavy tables where there's a lot of obscuring and a lot of you want to move units towards the middle to kind of occupy that space. And I would think if it's a heavy ruin table that basically has no line of sight, it has line of sight blocking to it, then definitely priest would be my number 1 thing to move to the middle. And I can get into why that is.
I was gonna say Styges feels like the one that's gotten the most of tame, because it wasn't Styges like the most common you'd see, Styges and Mars, because of the -1 to hit.
Yeah, it was just a -1 to hit, and then you so in 8th it was -1 to hit outside of 12, but then you had the combination, everybody got canticles, so you could throw cover on them. You don't have that option. You kind of pseudo do, because you can throw the Doctrina on it for certain units, and so you kind of still have that. And I think what's happened right now is Lucius is just so good with all the tools, and it's it just kind of overshadows it. And I think what'll happen is you'll see, which we'll talk about that later, but I think you're gonna see some of the other Forge Worlds come into play, particularly with this Book of Fire. If they can if they can kind of fix a few of the things out of the Book of Fire, that'd be real nice.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Styges feels like it's one of the more underappreciated Forge Worlds right now, where it's definitely not one that I'm seeing a lot of conversation on. Most of it seems to center on Mars and Lucius as the top 2, and then kind of everyone else just, do whatever you want. But I can, specifically think of, like, on the GW terrain, where having those infiltrating units in a forward deploy feels really useful.
Are any of the other Forge Worlds noteworthy or underappreciated?
All right, so there's one that's a lot of people have been talking about this, at least on the AdMech chats. Ryza comes to mind. It kind of gives you. They have the same rules as Blood Angels, so +1 to wound, +1 to charge. which is it's kind of nice. Again, way overshadowed by so the other three Forge Worlds. I think, and I know that Canon has been just started running Agrippina, which is actually half range. Their guns are additional AP, and they can basically always hold steady or set to defend if they're receiving a charge. So
that's neat.
Yeah. So it's not bad. He also they also have a really a pretty good warlord trait, which is Versa Vengeance, which basically if they're gonna lose a model, it can on a 4+ it can shoot. So basically like a Marine banner type thing. Yeah, it is kind of cool. So it allows you to kind of at least get one last lick in. So I mean it has some play. I think in heavier boards it probably have more. And then low key, one I think it's a favorite of mine, but I don't think it'll ever catch on. But if you want to just throw out 160, Skitarii troops out there, the Greya with its ignore combat attrition, it seems pretty good. Yeah.
So, like 100% fearless. That's really neat. Why does the Death Court have that? That's stupid. Anyways.
Yeah. So it's just I was like, wow, that's if you want to take that many bodies, and it plays super hordy, and then it has on top of that it has a 5+ against mortals.
Oh, that's pretty neat.
Yeah. So and I've seen a lot of mortals becoming more prevalent in the meta. So that might be a build. If you really want to sit there and paint 160 Rangers, that might just be the build for you.
Hopefully no one's that crazy because I don't want to play against that.
Yeah, it does seem like that, and then and then the one that we used to be excited about was Metallica, and it does have some play, and I think and it's the one that has the additional supplement to their codex, but it just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of like fell by the wayside with all the it's like even with that supplement it's kind of meh. I think it's kind of the same feeling I think that Tim is getting from Ordered of Martyred Lady right now.
Yeah, for sure. It's I don't know. It's not to digress, but it kind of brings it up where it's like, well, now I will actually kind of consider it, but it doesn't surpass the stuff that I was already bringing.
Right.
In my opinion.
Yeah, and that's my feeling on it too. It's got a lot of nice tricks, but the army. That's one thing about the army. It doesn't lend well to, this is just my opinion. I don't think it lends well to mixing Forge Worlds into two different detachments. One, because you're paying for that extra detachment, so it means that you have less on for CP, and really you really want to have your full buffs. Your choices on buffs become very, very limited. So if you're taking two detachments, you want to have two different priests for each, which means that your priests, you want to give them holy orders, and then you've got to keep them. It's more bookkeeping, in my opinion. So if you're gonna start this army, my suggestion is you put your training wheels on and you just go with one faction and start there. They're already strong as hell. So don't try and mix, because I think it just gets you even more. It'll just confuse you more and frustrate you more a little bit.
Or buy two different color of poker chips.
Yeah,
or buy two different color of poker chips, but it's like, ooh.
We've seen that before though, where like when you have to choose, like when you go in two different attachments, where a lot of times you have to consider like, well, do I really want to buy like duplicate characters, just to make sure that the same buffs can apply to both detachments, and it does kind of create some tension in list building, which I think is healthy generally for the game. But I can definitely see how that is extrapolated and almost like doubled for AdMech. We've seen some archetypes have already been like taking down events. Why don't you run us and kind of like describe those archetypes to us, and then like some of the other ones. We've seen like the gunline ones. We've seen Mitch Pelham from Bithpod, his all the Sicarians archetypes. What archetypes are out there right now?
Well, I mean, I think the one that's dominating right now is Lucius, and that's going between the 2 to 4 Vanguard Ranger 20-man units. You have at least a minimum of 1 Marshal, and typically that Marshal's taking Exemplar's Eternity, which gives basically replaces the Marshal's ability for re-rolling ones on the wound roll, and gives them reroll ones to hit and reroll ones to wound, which is extremely consistent for all Skitarii. I mean, just Marine players can attest that's really good for them. So
there isn't an army in the game that would say no to that.
Right, and given the fact that you can tinker the army to hit on 2s for a turn, that can really devastate an opponent, and that right there is really powerful. You're always taking a Manipulus, and the reason why is the Manipulus has an ability to bolster all galvanic weapons, and basically what it does is it gives you an additional 6-inch range, like if you didn't need it, and then it gives you additional AP on the weapon. So your strength 4 -1 1 damage rifle is now -2, and and then you layer on top of that the strat that the 2CP strat that you can get a discount for if you have the right holy order. It makes it 80 shots coming from a 20-man unit. So it basically changes it to rapid fire 2. So if you're within rapid fire range, you're basically rapid fire. You're basically shooting 4 shots a guy. Which
and
not many
with Lucius, that rapid fire ends up as 19.5 inches, right?
Yeah, 19.5 inches. And on top of that, if you want to solar flare them out of Lucius, which is the other powerful part. So say you have you're hiding your army and you don't spread out enough, or you're not careful with your pushing out your skirmishers, it's going to cost you, because then they can just get the angle and then shoot your juicy insides. So, and that's really where it's pretty devastating. And then on top of that, you can also do the exact same buff to the Vanguard. And Vanguard, they have a unique strat. So Vanguard naturally wound you on 6s to hit, auto wound you. And then, so usually their guns are strength 3, no AP, 1 damage. But you can buff them an additional, so you can buff them, I believe it's additional 6 inches. So they are 27 inches in range now. And you can, for 1 CP, you can get it to auto wound on 4s to hit. So if you're wounding, if you're wounding on 4s, you're hitting on 2s. I mean, not much. I think they did they did a comparison there. I think you can kill, most of the time you can kill Mortarion 60% of the time. I think that was the.
Dude, that is so gross.
Casual.
Yeah. Casually.
I mean, one of the interesting things here is that I feel like these buffs really change the dynamic of what these units do, where Vanguard are supposed to be the short-ranged weight of fire that plinks you through dice, but you have to roll the dice. And when you start stacking these buffs up, they're no longer, like 27 inches is no longer a short-range unit. And by the same token, strength 3 kind of limits how effective weight of dice can be, where you really want to be strength 4 with a lot of this stuff, so that you can wound T7 on 5s, or T3 and 4 better. There's a lot of good break points for being strength 4 versus strength 3, But then if you just get 50% wounds, right? If you just put out 60 shots, even into -1 to hit, even if you have no rerolls, you're going to have an expected value of 30 wounds. And then, of course, you know, you have the couple of things that hit that still have to roll the wound, which is like, oh crap. You know, there's a lot going on there, and it just becomes an incredibly consistent long, you know, mid-range unit instead of a weight of dice short-range unit, and it just really changes the dynamic of that unit for the better if you're an AdMech player, of course.
You know, Lucius is really good at taking a punch, and you know, and then you put on top of that additional board control. So if you're taking, you know, you're definitely you're shoring up your backfield, because you know there's not much it's going to come in on a unit of 20 guys sitting back there, particularly with all the different tools you have. And I haven't even talked about Info Slave Skull, which got fixed finally. And so, you know, so not much is going to come in to try and take those units out. So you've got your backfield shored up. Now you have an ability to just project firepower out there. So now you're really squeezing your opponent into even a smaller area. And if you have other elements that are pushing up, it's a really feels bad. And that's really what right now the tournaments are experiencing is, you know, extreme board control. You can trade. It was an upgrade in trading. So now I can take units and I don't fear Space Marines as much anymore. I don't fear Dark Eldar witches as much anymore. The consistency, you know, just the consistency of shooting and the volume of shooting went up twofold, and just other small, tiny little buffs that you know you don't think about, that can really just change the dynamic of the game, like 100%. One we haven't seen much outside of myself as I was going through my training in our dojo down south here, was Mars. And Mars has some interesting tricks. I think, you know, you can, for one, you know, with the one particular warlord trait, you can deep strike a unit of the and I guess that goes for every Forge World, because you have that ability. You can take that. You can deep strike a unit of the Electro Priest or Corpuscari or Fulgurites. But I think one that hasn't been explored, and I think once, you know, they kind of tame, you know, once it goes through its second FAQ to kind of like smooth out hopefully the rough edges here, you're going to see a little bit more vehicles come to the fore. I think one of my favorite vehicles is the Honor Gradud Crawler. I think it's very iconic to the faction, and you know, taking that with a Tech Priest, which is very you don't really see them much right now, but you know, always giving a tank 2+ to hit is pretty great. So and you know, if you're taking I think the heavy phosphor blaster or the Icarus array gun, I think they're very, very, very well into the current meta right now, because I mean they can really just, you know, take out you know, raiders. They can pretty much take out Marines in cover. So it's a lot of tools there. So if you're adding those tools on, I think you know, the fact that you can layer on the canticles to every Skitarii unit. Skitarii are already super powerful and buffed, makes it, you know, incredible. I think, and again, depending on the type of board, you might see Styges and Agrippina rise to the top. And I think that's what the book of the second, the Book of Fire, that's really what it's going to do here. Is it's going to take all these other Forge Worlds and just move them up to 11.
I was about to say, speaking of tools and buffs and whatnot, the Book of Fire seems like a natural transition. Like, what's up with that? What's new in it? What is it?
Well, all right. So they basically they gave Skitarii the veteran cohort Army of Renown, and it essentially is probably the best Army of Renown that they've come out with so far, which is, I would say, it can be meta altering, and we'll have to see what happens. But so with the archetypes that I just listed there, the restrictions that are given on the Army of Renown, and they've been pretty hard on the restrictions on all the other ones. This one, the restrictions feel like there are no restrictions, because you're restricted by you must have a marshal. It must be one of them must be your warlord. You're only able to take one type of priest of each. So you're not even restricted by just one priest. You're just restricted by, you can't have two dominuses, or you can't have two manipulus. You can just have one of each. Okay, check. No problem. Must be a single forge world. Okay, check. No problem. I'll save CP that way. And what do I gain from that? Well, all my Rangers and all my Vanguard must be Vanguard veterans, and every Skitarii model in there gets a veteran keyword, and basically the Rangers get 1+1 leadership, they get +1 attack, and their invul goes to a 5-up. So not only that, but if they don't move, they always count as in light cover. That's only the Ranger squad. So that's pretty powerful if you just want to sit back and just, I think we've been talking about it, just keep your board control. Once you move up into a certain spot, you just keep your board control. And the other one is for Vanguard, they get the same 1+ leadership, 1+ attack, and a 5-up invul. But theirs is you can roll 2d6 for advance, which again goes back to what John was saying, is they're no longer, like, even in other Forge worlds, they're no longer a really short range, get in there and trade, die, and move on. They're they can move up, hit you hard, and without really enough penalty. So they're going to get this 2d6 advance, drop the lowest. They're going to get if they get hit with a blast weapon, you never count as being 6 or more models. So you have to roll all your blast weapons to shoot at them. So it's a lot of, like, the buffs for those two units that are already good, and all at the cost of just being 10 points a model instead of 8. So right there you have an imbalance of, if you take any other, and it's kind of hard.
For reference, a Sisters of Battle troop with weapon skill 4 and an AP0 bolter is 11 points. Continue.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Zero salt detected?
No salt here. So with that, then you start layering on, and you start layering on, the Warlord trait calculate without diversion, which basically gives you each of the stratagems that are in the Army of Renown a discount of 1 CP for each, and that includes binaric offense, which gives you you can choose 2 Skitarii core units and choose one enemy, and those 2 units get +1 to their wound rolls against that enemy. So I've got an Imperial Knight. Hey, I'm choosing that guy. Here are my 2 Ballistari las cannon units, and they're just going to blow you off the board. How about that?
Hit on 2s, yeah, that's really good.
So hit on 2s, wound on 2s. Have a nice day.
How much does that cost?
It's 3 CP, but the first time I use it, it's 2 CP.
2. Okay. Whew.
which is enough. I mean, if you have a big unit like that, it's just gonna. It's not only the fact that they gave it to just one unit, they gave it to 2 units, which is, it's just crazy. So you have aggression override, which if you're in the Conqueror imperative, which for anybody that doesn't know, it's +3 to your movement, and you deprecate by having less of a save. So most of the Skitar units go from a 4-up save to a 5-up save. That gives you, if you made a charge, you get an additional +1 attack. So that one is sort of, I don't see many people using. It's nice to have 51 attacks on my Ruststalkers, but do I really want 51 attacks on my Ruststalkers if I can just get 41 attacks? And
I sure shit don't want you to have 51 attacks in your Ruststalkers.
How much does that stratagem cost? The +1 attack?
1 CP, so I can do it for free.
So 1 CP, and it'll cost 0 if you're in the right Doctrina with the right Warlord trait. But you still just have these stratagems even if you don't take that Warlord trait, or even if you're not in the right Doctrina. So if you're charging something that just really needs to die and you're not sure about the math, I get it. It's abhorrent to think about actually spending 1 CP on your 1 CP strats, but you still can in the other 4 turns.
Well, so here's what I did. So I'm getting these rules off of what I saw on the videos that I saw. So I don't really have the book with me. So I just want full disclosure there. We don't know if it's only playable outside of that Doctrina.
It is. It is.
It is.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
so then yeah, it's pretty. Then it's insanity. Then it's a lot of insanity because you throw that one on there, and they naturally have a unit of Ruststalkers naturally has 3 attacks apiece, and then the Alpha has 4, and then you have the regular Skitarian strat to add 1 attack on them. So now you're adding 2 attacks, and then that's how you get to 51. Again, am I going to do it all the time? I think most of the time they're going to, with blades, they're just going to kill whatever they're going to run into with enough mortals. I mean, it's just things are going to die.
I know that we've already hit some craziness levels here, but theoretically, if they're armed with a cord claw, which is 0 points, don't they make an additional attack with this weapon, which would technically take the unit to 61 attacks?
Yes, it does. Yes, that's very true. But luckily, that one doesn't cause mortals on the wounds. But yes, you're taking an additional.
So only 51 attacks cause mortals on the wounds. The other 10 are merely just here's some dice.
I don't. Yeah.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Yeah. Thank goodness. I mean, woof. My gosh.
There's a deductible up there for the rest of us.
Has anybody done the math on that? Like into something big like a Knight or a Warhound Titan or whatever to see how much damage it gets?
Yeah. So most things will it can get to it's strength 5 on there, so you can get up to a strength 6. So most things it'll be wounding things on 4s, with 6s doing mortals.
Amazing.
So yeah, and I'm not even considering anything that's below T4 because it's just gonna kill them.
Right.
Once it touches it's just gonna kill them. And I thought witches were bad, and I'm like, wow, like if I throw this in there, I mean, again, and they're more durable than witches. So
yeah, for sure, they have 2 wounds and whatnot.
2 wounds.
Yeah, they cost more than witches as well, but cost is always relative.
Yeah, again, yes. For what it does for the army, it's I mean,
still relatively aggressively priced. Price to move, is that what we call it?
Yeah, price to move. Yeah. What can I get you? What can I get you to have these Ruststalkers?
Are there any? I was gonna say, are there any other notable stratagems?
Oh, yes. So there's Bionic Endurance, which gives the unit, and it didn't say it's for 1 unit, but the way it's worded and the CP cost is based on the PL of the unit. You can basically give it a 5-up deal no pain. So layer on top of that a 5-up Thinel Pain on, say, a Lucius unit that's already getting an incredible save, a Space Marine save, that's already getting a 5-up Invul. Now you have a 5-up Thinel Pain. It just makes it super durable. And then the last one is the Expedited Purge Protocol, which is this is the aggressor one. It's the aggressor imperative, which is when I'm getting my +3 to move. The other one, the Conqueror, was when I'm on adding 1 to my weapon skill. I misspoke on that one earlier. So on the aggressor one, this is the one that I have less of a save, but I'm getting 3-inch move on top of that, and then on top of that, I have advance and charge, which is brand new to the army. Like, it just completely changes everything. So it's like that's the one piece of the puzzle that was missing from the entire army. We didn't have advance and charge, so we had to plan our things out. Now we just have kind of like hey, I have a reset button here, advance and charge, you go. And so that's another one that is absolutely just bonkers. And
Rust Stalkers and Infiltrators deploying 9 inches away, then advancing charging into your guts.
Yes, pretty much. Again, it's per CP cost, but I don't. So the only time that it's going to cost you 2 CP for this guy is if you have the Dune Striders. That's it. It's 1 CP for these guys to advance and charge. I just think it's nuts.
That's so dumb. So, like, I knew you when all the rules were being shown off yesterday. I knew you guys were like, "Oh, this is fucking dumb," and this is bad for the game and whatnot. I didn't realize how good this supplement is. It's stupid good, man.
So what do you lose here? What is it? What do you lose? Okay, so here's where I think this is where it just rips the meta. A good player with these rules will absolutely dumpster a middle opponent, a lower table opponent. They will just cruise right through until game 3 or 4.
Gee,
right?
No way.
Yeah, well, it's just on top of that.
Right.
They will dumpster that. What do you lose here? You lose the ability, and we didn't even talk about this. You lose the ability to have an auto fight last with your Electro Priest, because you can't take them in this. So you have to be careful of where and how you move your units. So, I think Tim was referring to Mitch Pelham's list, where he's throwing in, 30 Sicarians in your face. But if he goes second, it's all countercharge bait. And that stuff, even as good as it is and it's durable, will just flat out die to 5 witches. They will just pick them up. Like,
even with the 5 Thinel Pain and the 5 Invul save,
it might mess with the stats a little bit, but
okay.
I think Incubi are going to kill them.
Yeah, Incubi just dunk on them. If Incubi get to go first, they dunk on them.
Look, I'm not asking just because I'm a Dark Elder player, just in general. But it just seems like in order to counter your cheese, you have to continue bringing Strife. This is just an argument to bring Strife again.
Yeah. Oh, no. You definitely want. You definitely need countercharge elements here. I don't like personally. I think I don't like throwing all my dice on. Throwing all my models on forward deploy. I think forward deploy can be used to, make sure that your opponent is aware of it, and any decision he makes to come to the middle of the board, he's got to pay a price, and that's what I want it to do. So if he's gonna, so that's the thing. I get one opportunity to take a fight last with a unit of Rust Stalkers, and that is through allowing my alpha to have a warlord trait. which is one of the unique things. I think you can take it. Maybe the Necron Codex has that ability as well. But
I know Marines can do relics, but warlord traits I think is new for Skitarii.
Right, but it's restricted. It's not. It's restricted to only the Skitarii warlord traits, and you don't have access to any of the cult warlord traits. So that's only specific to priests. But so you have one opportunity to take it, which good players can play around it by trying to be outside of 3 inches of the guy that has it, because it's a 3-inch aura.
But it's still a good offensive tool as well to stop interrupts and stuff.
Yes, it definitely. Yeah, it can definitely stop interrupts. It can. So it does have value. So that's the one thing they do lose on this, and that's it. You basically right now, and none of the archetypes have any buffs. Nobody's taking cataphrons much, outside of a few bit of support that people want or something like that. Nobody's taking the Castellan robots, so you're on the cult side. I mean, the last few releases with all the different books that we got, through, and all the new releases, the army is so heavily skewed to Skitarii that you're like, wow, there's a lot of options there, whereas the cult side is lagged, and you don't have many options. And the options they gave you in their Army of Renown were extremely restrictive. You couldn't take any Skitarii, you couldn't have any type of support there, which that's what I thought this would mirror. That you can't have any support from your tech priest. So as to say, the marshal is the guy that's going to take it, or I thought they would introduce a princeps or something like that, but it just didn't happen. So what does this mean? It means that your Styges, your Greya builds, all of a sudden, hey, I want to have 180 Skitarii running around the field. And we haven't even discussed any of the custom forge worlds, because the exploratory forge world that gives them an additional 3 inches to their pregame move, that becomes very interesting now. So I don't know how much. That's a lot of people will have to play into that. And again, like I said, I don't think anybody wants to build 180 Skitarii Vanguard or Ranger, and just move, and having to move them. Yeah, I'm kind of too old to be moving that much around. So I realize that it's a lot. Being on going back to it requires a lot of CP on this. So how much, I've seen a lot of people taking builds where they're layering so many warlord traits and so many relics on there that they're starting with 5 CP, and sometimes then your pregame moves, you're starting, so when you're basically using 7 to 8 CP just in your pregame, deployment, list building, all those things, you're already down to that. So that's another thing, is if you're gonna do it that way, then this has less of an impact. But I think people will start scaling down the buffs and just to the absolute necessary. And once they optimize that, and you start with 9 CP, and you can do some of these things, particularly at the discount that they're getting, that's where things get kind of really weird and really, I guess, meta altering. And I would, and look, if you're a non-player of AdMech, it can be really frustrating. And I love the army. I bought it. I think it was maybe a year and a half after. I bought it from John Cook, the initial build that he had, about a year and a half after it originally came out, which was 2015. And immediately I, just took my Tau army and said, okay, I'm done with you. This is really what I like. And just the aesthetic, just everything. It just called to me. That I like, and as aficionado, I really like it, and then that's why I'm kind of disappointed in the fact that it's just so over the top strong that it can be salt inducing to your opponent. It's really like, there are, if it's handled correctly, it can really just obliterate your opponent in 2 turns. I mean, if you're on an open table where you have very little ruins, it can be a real feels bad. I mean, it's great for things like when you're playing on a team tournament, and that's part of the strategy of like, hey, I need to get on that open board and things like that, and I think that's cool. And people know what they're getting into when they play in a team tournament. But in a singles tournament, when you layer these different rules, and it just becomes like, oh my god, we have to fix the AdMech codex as it is, and all of a sudden this gets thrown onto it. I'm not really sure, that there's a forward-thinking strategy to this, or how much playtesting went into it to understand the army and how it works.
Right on. How would you fix the AdMech codex?
So, all right. Well, first of all, Ballistari are, I think, they're, as an overall cost, I think most guitar units are undercosted. So right off the bat, right there, at 8 points a model, the Ranger and Vanguard without any buffs sounds great. Like, hey, they get a natural 4-up save. They can, we can do a few things here, even just considering Doctrina. Once you layer all these other things and their offensive output, 8 points is too cheap. So, so the first impression in the meta right now is their troops are way too cheap, and the way you're taking them right now, it's just way too cheap. So I would take them from 8 points to 10 points, and then your veteran squad goes from 10 to 12, and maybe even that is too cheap. Maybe it should be 13 points a model, with all these other buffs in there. So,
would you be okay with that, or would you? Is
absolutely,
that like
absolutely, yeah. I mean, look, the idea is, I think a good list would have 2 big blob units, and then you'd have a bunch of little idiots running around, doing your actions, So like a 5-man unit, while it can do stuff, is not as deadly as a 20-man unit, because all of a sudden you're amping. It's just exponential, you're amping that exponential. So it gives your opponent the opportunity to say, hey, that's what I want to take out of your army. I want to remove that element of your army, or at least neuter it to the point where it's just another 5-man unit and you don't care about it anymore.
Gotcha. So I guess my next question would be is if that was implemented, say, they did raise the amount of points that a Ranger or Vanguard unit is, would you pivot to something else? I know that obviously the Skitarii part of the codex is very strong, but would we see more things like priests, or would we see the return of your Onager Gauntlet? Like, what do you think, if that was implemented? What do you think AdMech players would pivot to?
All right, so but wait, there's more. There's more stuff
there's
that we
more?
need. There's more stuff that we need to fix.
There's more stuff in there's more stuff in the fire. Oh, more stuff didn't need to be fixed. Okay, what actually needs to be fixed?
Well, I think the Ballistari, they need a cost. Either the weapon needs to go up. I think the weapon does need to go up, in my opinion. So
I feel a very Castellan era effect on the meta right now, where it's just kind of like we're really scrutinizing the vehicles we're taking on our list. Either super light vehicles like Piranhas and Mortifiers that just give you a lot of mission playing potential for cheap, or transports that you're going to play anyhow, but you're going to kind of wince when they get blown up by the chickens.
Yeah, Right now, I can tell you that 3 chickens will just take out whatever vehicle they want. Doesn't matter which one it is. So, or just render it to the point where I can take a Ranger squad and just finish it off. So they need to be, and I think things have settled down. Like my initial builds, man, I brought them all. I took 10. Like, why not? Let's take 10. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited. It's amazing. These things are amazing. And then I started, I can't shoot everything. I've got to scale down. I think things have settled to the point where you have 2 3-man units, or a 3-man unit and 2 2-man units.
You also saw we had that game that you and I had, Reggie, where like you didn't figure it out like what my game plan was till like turn 4, but my plan was just to ignore your chickens.
Yeah, which was pretty
I was just
funny.
killing everything else.
Yeah, but again, I was a bit apprehensive about sisters, and how I didn't know, I didn't understand how their new play style would go. But then, well, you were saucing me up a little bit too, and I'm like, la 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 la. Oh, like, oh my God, what the hell? What's going on here? Oh, wait a minute, and then I course corrected. But that's the thing that the list allowed me to do, was that the army, the way the rules allowed me to do, is I course corrected immediately mid game without even I was like, oh, okay, I need to do this. And guess what? I have this strat over here where I can move the chickens, and they don't care about, they'll advance 6 inches additional, and they don't care that, their ballistic skill doesn't go down because I ignore it. So how about that? And, so I'm able to move things up to the position that I need to get them if they were out of position. And then I think in that game I had held them back, and I needed them to move way forward just to get angles on you because you were hiding so well. Picking up, I immediately picked up a unit of rust stalkers, and the next turn I was able to get them in your backfield and eliminate one of your bodyguard units. So it was, that's the thing that the book allows. And I think that should stay. That part should definitely stay, because it is engaging. I dig that, man. It gives me so many options and things like that.
Stuff like that definitely felt like we were playing like a game,
Yeah, but it's the hey, boom, I'm shooting you, you're dead. That stuff is, that's okay, 1 unit, and then my opponent counters that and takes that unit out, and I don't have it anymore. Okay, it did its job, it's gone. I understand that as a player. But if I can just say, okay, well, I'm just going to bring this other one, and I'm going to do the same thing to you again, then it's kind of like rinse, repeat, and it exhausts the opponent, and I think it exhausts the meta. And I want people to go. I want to have tournaments. We have Crucible. I want people to come out to Crucible, and I want 120 players showing up at Crucible. But if you have these oppressive things that just keep coming out, and I'm literally just speaking of the Codex itself, because we've seen the Codex and the stats don't lie. I don't know how the Vanguard, the veteran cohort is going to affect it. I think it's going to add more pressure to it, but people will just, I think in the chat yesterday, well, I'm just going to start painting up my Sigmar army. None of all of us are casuals at Sigmar. I mean, we like playing it. I love the models; they're beautiful, but we're strictly casuals when we go there. We're hardcore for 40K.
I think we're going to see almost a threefold effect. One, I think we're going to see a slower response of GW to dealing with AdMech, because when Dark Eldar dropped, their win rate was immediately obvious. However, when AdMech dropped, they didn't really have a peer or contemporary as far as Codex power to hold back their win rate. AdMech, they're very, very, very strong, but Dark Eldar are still out there with a 65% win rate. So every time AdMech paired to Dark Eldar, assuming decent terrain, that's going to hold back their win rate a little bit. Just because those two are still kind of in the same pure group of power. So just based off that, by having, a contemporary in the power level, I think that's going to hold back their win rate a little bit, which might cause GW to slow the response. Two, the weird kind of, hobby lag is a thing. And we're definitely at the point where people are starting to take notice of AdMech, and we're going to see a shift of, there's going to be three types of people. People that are just going to play their army no matter what, no matter how bad the meta gets. There are people who are just going to like go to Sigmar or just go do something else, hit the gym, whatever, take up gardening. Or there's going to be the people who are going to switch over to AdMech. And so now we're going to see where like the bandwagon and the player representation starts kind of exploding and ramping up. And right as that's happening, Book of Fire is dropping. So right as people are finishing their armies and getting ready to field them, now it's like boom, have all these extra rules on top of it. And so I think it's just going to really spike upwards, the effect this is going to have on the meta over the next. I would say 2 or 3 months, but I've heard rumors and rumblings about orcs, and it's about to get real cage matchup in here. But definitely, at least for the next month, it's going to be a little wild.
Yeah, and all the while I'm on vacation, so I don't get to play.
Get to partake at all.
I just get to see from the sidelines. I mean, I'm looking at all these. I think the Show Me Showdown's going on right now, and
yeah,
I looked at who was taking AdMech, and I'm like, oh Christ! It's like everybody just went, on that. Not the usual names that I usually see associated with AdMech, which. That's the way the meta is, and that's I think that's healthy. I think we need to purge these things, at least tame them. But those are the two big offenders in my was the Rangers and the Vanguard and the Ballistari are the two big offenders. I think everything. I think all the other elements of the army haven't even been explored. So once they neutered that, hopefully, once they tame it down. I don't want to say neuter because I think, I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think it's going to be a positive points change for that. They're definitely not. I mean, the people who are hopeful for them to change the rules midstream, I don't think that's going to happen. I think, they've always said that, rules changes are for a codex / campaign book. That's it. I don't think I mean, heck, poor Chaos Space Marines, they're still at 1 wound. So, I don't think that's going to happen. But I think if they tone down that, people can take 1 or 2 units of those bulk units like that. I think that's okay, and I think what people will pivot to will be more priests and boats, or more priests being forward deployed. Which, I mean, it's really the only thing that is keeping, for me, that's the only thing that's keeping me away from that. Like, that is so powerful. That the guaranteed an open board. If you're not using GW style, the open terrain, the US open terrain style, that the veteran cohort, it is absolutely ridiculous. If I can get angles on your army, and I go first, or even if I don't, my counterattack on you will just be dumb. But the U.S. Open terrain, I think it opens up. I think since it's more closed and you have to work at your angles. I think things. I think people will just pivot to having the priest. They'll stay away from that because they want the priest. They want to be able to have targeted smite that the priest gives them. They want to be able to induce fight last on units that come in. A lot of people like having the Cataphon Breachers, because I think Cataphon Breachers are low key pretty cool. They don't get any buffs. They're the buffs that they do get are very limited. You can give them a 5 feel no pain within an aura range of a tech priest, or any tech priest. So you can. There are tools to work with them, and I think they're really good. And I think and then they're a unit that can also make. They're not core, so they would have to have a tech priest following them along to kind of throw out the fight last on them. But they're no slouch in combat. Now, they're all right. Let's just put it that way. They're not exceptional, but again, if you're throwing them in the back and they're using, I think a lot of people like the cult side of Mechanicus to help the army. I think the army flows much better when you're using both. So that's my feeling on it. I think there is a really weird touch and go, because as you put more obscuring on the table, that means Dark Eldar come to power more. And I think the pushback to that will be AdMech going more into a close combat skew, and we have no idea what the orcs are going to come out with, but they look pretty cool. So
they're gonna be nasty. They're gonna be so nasty.
I mean, it's going to be crazy. I mean, I'm hoping that I'm hoping that it helps that, and I think that I think there's got to be some combination of the GW US Open table with the current tables that most of the meta has seen. And I think maybe I think the measurements are 13 by 13 for the US Open. If they skew them down to 10 by 10, you have 10 by 10 squares. Or if you play some of the medium tables for WTC, I think those two table styles can best serve the meta to make it healthy or healthier. It just, having an open table and facing AdMech is just, it's just a very disappointing situation, and I understand, I get it, it's just, it can be a frustrating experience, but again, I'm hoping that that they take those elements that we discussed, and I'm hoping that they apply some measure to them without just completely wrecking. I enjoy having that much Skitarii on the board. I just think that they shouldn't, either the CP cost to enable them to do certain things should go up, or their cost should go up. So one of the two. So if GW had the idea of, hey, we want this to be a horde army, and I don't think that's their prerogative. I think that because their horde army for Imperium is guard, and that's really what it should be. But I think that we've gotten into the territory where you have that one build that guard used to have that just got so many buffs, and if they were Catachan, they were just layered on top of that. It got oppressive to even go in there and charge them.
Yeah, I mean, kind of in the talk of what these nerfs would potentially look like. I actually think that points cost are certainly a thing to address. I actually think that the army really needs the rules addressed, because right now I honestly don't think you can cost AdMech appropriately, because they have too many different types of buffs. Where AdMech base data sheet and with the character buffs is a really offensively efficient army, and that's fine. Armies are allowed to be offensively efficient, but AdMech is also hypermobile and also very defensive and also costed aggressively. And I feel like you can't just make AdMech cost a little bit more, because what does that look like, right? If you take your 60 Skitarii list and you add 2 points to every Skitarii, and that means that you're adding 120 points. What does that look like in practice? Well, it means that you now have like 55 Skitarii and one less servitor squad, or like one less skirmishing unit. I don't think that changes the problem with AdMech at all, honest to goodness. I think that AdMech is doing the exact same thing still. I really want to see some of their other, pick a core identity for the army. If that identity is hyper efficient shooting and pretty good melee, so be it. Tone down the other stuff. I really want to see more, it be a more easily countered book, where I want the Lucius warlord trait that does transhuman essentially, make that shooting only. it's the same thing if you get into shooting a matchup with AdMech. But if you're a flexible army, maybe you get close to AdMech and you start punching them, and they lose some of their buffs. Take the ignore AP 1 and 2 Warlord Trade or Holy Order, whatever it is. Kind of make it like Sisters, where instead you take AP 1 and 2 and you reduce the AP by 1, so that they don't just ignore AP 2, they just treat it as AP 1 instead. They're still taking some kind of downside here. It's a little bit easier to hit them. It's a little bit better to charge them. Take their core identity and trim a little bit off of everything else. That's what I would like to see.
I could get behind that. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I think the book it's a very deep book. I think it will allow other builds to rise, and you might get some diversity in what people like. And I could definitely get behind that. I mean, there's so many cool elements to AdMech that, and I like literally, we're at an hour and 43 minutes, but I could literally talk another hour just on, why play AdMech. So
yeah, and we are getting ready to wrap it up. So I guess I want to say, the final segment, how we'd end this would be, what advice could you give out there to people who are, going to try to stick it out and fight the good fight, and either go for give AdMech the best game they can, whether that's in the form of a low point scoring win or a high point scoring loss.
Okay. So we talked a lot about AdMech and the order of operations. I think as an opponent to it, you need to try to. I don't want to say subterfuge, because that's always like a bad word in competitive 40K, and I don't mean it that way. But you want to fake out your opponent. And you want to get them to burn a Doctrina when they don't want to, particularly when it's most efficient when AdMech goes second, because they have to guess your motive and what you're going to do. And if you make, if they burned their bulwark imperative, then don't go out there. Don't go on the offensive, because they're super amped up to receive you. Make sure if you're playing the Lucius build, make sure you're aware of make sure you're pushing out on your edges so that they don't get the angles on the part of your army that you want to keep alive, because that unit will come in and just take it out. So you must have your skirmishers up there. You must take advantage of terrain, being behind a building, being behind obscuring. Make sure they cannot get that angle. If you're, be aware of things of like any cult core unit or character can, make you fight last. That's a really big surprise. And at that point, it would, if you lose a key unit on a flank of the table, all of a sudden, and it's on your turn that you charge them, now you have an open hole so that Lucius unit can just fill it and then just attack the rest of your army. So you have there are elements there that you want to make sure that don't let them play their game, and try to induce them into spending their canticles or Doctrina at the wrong time. I would also say the builds that go into AdMech need to have sacrificial lambs built in, and you have to be willing to accept losses, not of your core stuff, but of pieces of your army that are tempting for AdMech, that they know that they want to take out, or one of the ones that they want to take out, but you've got to get something in return. And you've got to make sure that you put them in a weird position where they can't buff the unit, or that they overextend themselves. And I think that's really the key there, is if you make an AdMech player overextend themselves, where they're out of position with their priests or their marshal, and you're going to induce mistakes, and you're not going to allow them to hyper buff a unit. And those are the few of the elements that I would talk, that I would talk to people that don't play the book. I would also make sure that you have a good conversation with your opponent, with your AdMech opponent, and try to understand the elements of the army and the combos that the person's trying to put together. I know it's a very layered book, but some of those combos, and I think everybody understands the majority combos, particularly Lucius, people are going to understand a lot more of what they're trying to do. I think, John, what do you think? I mean, you're the expert. You're the 40k expert here, bro. Boy King, come on.
The Boy King.
All right, so my thing with AdMech is one, get practice into them and read the book a couple times as well. I'm gonna be honest, the first time I read the AdMech book, I saw the 1 CP strat to make you fight last if you were near like a Fulgurite unit or a Cult Mechanicus character. And I read that and I'm like, this is stupid, this is broken, why is this here, blah, 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 whatever. This is like first read, we're getting like pictures off of YouTube videos that I'm pausing. I'm like, this is ridiculous. And then I play AdMech a couple times, this stratagem hasn't come up yet. I honest to God, I forgot it existed. And then I was rereading the book because I got my butt handed to me by it. And I was like, all right, let me like reread this thing, try to figure out what I can do here. And I saw the strat again. I'm like, you know what? I literally thought this was broken. And there was so much going on that I forgot about it. It's very easy to get gotcha'd by AdMech, not because your opponent is malicious or isn't telling you things, but because there's so much going on. So I say get practice games against AdMech. Do not let the first time you play against AdMech be at a tournament that you bought a plane to. Like if you bought a plane ticket to play against AdMech for the first time, you're going to get a beer afterwards. And if your opponent is a sport, they'll buy it for you because the game's over in 20 minutes. AdMech has a ton going on, and unfortunately you kind of need to track all of it. And for that reason, I think the best thing to do against AdMech is look for ways to simplify the board state, where I accept if I put a unit out in front of the AdMech army, it's dead. So I start looking at, all right, what can actually shoot me? Let's just kill those things. Let me just kill the fast units. Let me bait them into, more so than burning a Doctrina, although that is very important. Against Lucius, I try to bait people to burn the Solar Flare. I get it, I'm going to lose something. Like maybe I let them kill a Retributor squad and it sucks because they got a gate off, they got an angle. There's just like a little bit there for them to get, and they kill a Retributor squad. That sucks, I like my Retributors. But if I have to stop screening out the Solar Flare, that's going to be better for me long-term than whatever that Retributor squad was going to do. So try to find ways to like limit their mobility, make them more predictable. AdMech is very strong. They have incredible power. They have a number of units that are dynamic, but I don't think that the entire army is dynamic. If you can neutralize the dynamic elements or make them more predictable, I think you have a much better chance of making it through a mission against AdMech.
Good advice.
Yeah, I 100% agree there. You heard it from the Boy King.
Unfortunately, we are pretty much out of time. I unfortunately have to go to work, or fortunately, I should say. A lot of people were quite as fortunate as I was during COVID, and it pays for all my little war dollies and my podcasting subscriptions. But Reggie, thank you so much for joining us, and of course, Will and John. Every time I get to record with you guys, it's always a pleasure. Honestly, this podcast is just one of my favorite things. I love hanging out with my friends and talking about Warhammer. But Reggie, go. I was going to say, if there's anything you wanted to say, or like any shout outs, or if you want to plug Crucible real quick, like now's your time.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, Crucible's happening October 15th through 17th. If you're in the Southeast, come in and enjoy, 3 wonderful days. We're looking to have 120 players. We want to be a major. We're going to have, cool terrain, a cool place to stay, and it's a lot of fun, and I've been TOing it for the last 5 years. I do truly enjoy seeing all the wonderful faces that come down. Also, I want to thank you guys, Florida Man podcast, for bringing me on. I truly appreciate it. I enjoy listening to you guys. As I think the impetus for me to get on here was because I felt you guys you rushed through the initial codex review. And I really wanted, I really, if anybody doesn't understand, I'm really passionate about AdMech. Understand that it's not a steampunk army, it's a diesel punk army.
To be fair, I totally put you on the spot because you're like, Tim, you guys didn't talk about enough. I'm like, good, you just volunteered yourself.
Yeah, and as you guys can hear, I love talking about it. So, and if you like to get more, and I know that there's not a ton of AdMech stuff out there. There's a Scutarius and Tech Priest by Rob Sanders are two great books. They're not too long. And if you want something outside of 40K that'll get you interested, there's an anime called Last Exile. There's about 26 episodes in that anime. Beautiful stuff, beautiful artwork, and it is totally AdMech, outside of the crazy servitor, your lobotomized type stuff. But if you enjoy AdMech like I do, you enjoy a completely different feel of an army. That's what it means to me. But again, thank you guys for allowing me to just blabber on about, the game that I love to play, the friends that I love to hang out with, and just great times all. I don't think I've had a bad experience with any of you at any tournament. And honestly,
not even the Lord of Skulls before LVO, the Casper.
No, not even that. I 100% laugh at that. I think it's one of the funniest things, and you know what? That LVO was awesome because I got drunk every day. It was meaningless to me. I was like, well, I'm at the bottom tables. Why not? I'm drinking. Let's go. And again, appreciate you guys. Appreciate what you bring. What Brohammer has done for the Florida meta. Making things, competitive but healthy competitive, and eliminating the gotchas, eliminating a lot of the dickery that have been going on, and I appreciate you guys so much. Thanks.
Thank you, Reggie. We appreciate you.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. This has been a great episode of Florida Man Podcast. By the time you're reading this, we'll probably have orc previews, if not rules in hand. So we'll be talking about that next. Until next time, I'm Tim.
I'm John.
I'm Will.
And standing in, I'm Dan. And then we will be, we're Florida Man Podcast. And thanks for listening. We'll be talking to you all soon. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.